Forever Changes by Love.
Let's talk records. Arthur Porter was born in Memphis, Tennessee. His mother was a school teacher. Father was a jazz musician that he barely saw throughout his life. His father, being a musician, exposed Arthur to a love of music at an early age. He and his mother moved to Los Angeles when he was very young. In the early 1950s, his mother married a man named Clinton Lee, who adopted Arthur, then becoming Arthur Lee. Because of his mother's teaching job, they were able to buy a house in South Central LA, where he met Johnny Echols in school, who was also a musician like him. Brian McLean was born on the other side of Los Angeles. His mother was a flamenco dancer. His father was an architect for big celebrities of the time like Elizabeth Taylor. He became interested in music very early on, but was also very much into Elvis Presley. Later on, he began playing folk and blues music at local bars and clubs. McLean heard the Beatles when he was 17 years old, and it changed his life. Arthur Lee had been singing, playing many instruments, and recording with many bands since 1963. When Lee saw the Byrds live, he decided that he wanted to start a band that played a mix of folk rock with the rhythm and blues that he loved. At the time, McLean was an equipment engineer for the Byrds, but shared the same idea as Lee and soon started a band with him. Lee's high school friend Johnny Echols then joined as lead guitarist. Bass player Ken Forsey and drummer Alban Snoopy Pfister soon joined after. The name of the band was The Grassroots. After finding out that there was another band called The Grassroots, to avoid legal action, they changed their name to simply just Love. Love began playing the club circuit in Los Angeles and signed with Elektra Records. They released their self-titled debut album in 1966 and had a small hit with a Burt Bacharach Hal David song, My Little Red Book, which reached number 52 on the singles chart, while the album reached number 57 on the albums chart. Around this time, Pfister, who was never too confident on his drumming abilities, moved to harpsichord and was replaced by drummer Michael Stuart Ware. They also added TJ Cantrelli on woodwind instruments. The next album, The Couple, was released later that same year, and their single, 7 and 7 Is, a proto-punk garage rocker, became their highest charting single, reaching number 33 on the chart. Major success, however, eluded the band, which may have been attributed to Lee's refusal to tour. It didn't help matters that relations between Lee and McLean, who were the main songwriters, were beginning to sour. McLean often pushed to have more of his songs on the albums, but Lee wanted to have more control to accomplish his musical vision. For the next album, Elektra founder Jacques Holzman, who had also co-produced Love's two previous albums, suggested to the band that they try a different approach, perhaps a gentler side of folk rock. Bruce Botnick, who had engineered Love's two previous albums, was set to produce. Botnick had just finished engineering two songs for the Buffalo Springfield Again album and asked Neil Young to co-produce. Neil was on board, but then later changed his mind last minute. Around this time, Pfister and Cantrelli left the band. The group, now quintet, would set out to explore folk, psychedelic rock, baroque pop, classical, and even mariachi. Recordings began June of 1967 and they lasted until September, and started with some complications. Only Lee seemed to be prepared for the intricacies of the lush sound that he was going for. The rest of the band was more complacent and unprepared. The album was supposed to be a double album, and the group was hoping that it would be a double album, but Elektra changed its mind when they thought that it may be too expensive. McLean and Echols were infuriated by this turn of events, having worked for months on musical arrangements for songs that would not be included. After this, their motivation to cooperate on the recordings was missing. Botnick, however, devised a plan. He got members of the famous Wrecking Crew to come in and fill in their shoes. They hired legendary session musicians, Carol Kaye on bass, Billy Strange on guitar, Don Randy on piano, and Hal Blaine on drums to finish two songs, and Morrigan and the Daily Planet. This strategy worked because when the rest of the band felt left out, they rehearsed intensely to be prepared and gave it their all. Lee and McLean worked with musical arranger David Angel to make their goal of orchestral arrangements, strings, and horns become a reality. Forever Changes by Love was released November 1st, 1967 on Elektra Records. It was produced by Bruce Botnick and Arthur Lee. While the album got great reviews, it only reached 154 in the US. But in the UK, where it seemed that they were more popular, it reached number 24. The first single was Alone Again Or, released January of 1968. It was written by McLean with Spanish orchestration in honor of his flamenco dancer mother. He wrote it back in 1965, and it was intended for Love's first album, but it was not quite ready yet. The song reached number 99 on the pop singles chart, but it has become one of Love's most well-known songs. A House Is Not a Motel, written by Lee, which is also on the album, was the B-side. Single The Daily Planet with And More Again as the B-side followed in the UK in March of 1968. It has been said that And More Again is about Andrula Morinoa, who is a girl that both Lee and McLean dated. You're Mine and We Belong Together and Laughingstock as the B-side was released next in September of that same year. Both singles failed to chart. Forever Changes by Love would be the final album with the classic lineup. McLean bitterly left the band for reasons unknown, and Lee fired the rest of the members right after. Although not as successful at the time, modern reappraisals have deemed it as one of the best albums of all time. Rolling Stone magazine ranked the album number 40 on the 500 Greatest Albums of All Time list in 2003 and 2012. It went down to 180 on the 2020 Revisited edition. The album was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame in 2008. It was added to the National Recording Registry by the Library of Congress in 2011.